Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for introductions. My name is Paweł. I tried to count my years of experience in the IT industry, but after I went past 15, I decided to stop counting because it started to make me feel a little bit old. So I'm not really sure how many those are. The topic for today is the quality in release train CICD model, which I think is quite interesting topic. Hopefully you will find the session interesting. And the agenda for today is that we will start by discussing a few core concepts that we want to embed in, during our lecture. I will be providing a few high-level examples of what kind of dangers we may encounter during our road. And the key part of the presentation itself will be the exercise. What we will try to do will be to build a software development lifecycle together, starting from complete scratch. At the beginning, there was developer and defects, right? So we will start trying to build this process. We will be doing it in stages. So we will start with something very basic, and I will be throwing different obstacles, different problems at our way, which will cause us to make modifications to this software model. Now, a few disclaimers. One is that no model is what will work for every organization. It's always case-by-case basis, and as we are building such plans, such strategies for how the testing should be done, we need to do it, well, case by case. And secondly, this session is inspired by the true events, almost like a movie. However, it is not a documentary. So the way we will be building this model will not be an exact sequence of the actions that happened, but it will have some extra spice, and it will also have some extra steps that we should have done to make this model better. Okay, so we are starting with the theory. And one of the main problems that big companies who employ hundreds of people have, so those problems are related to having silos in those organizations. So for example, we would have hundreds of people, they would be distributed among tens or more Scrum teams, and every team would be working on their own. Now, they would be working on their code branches, they would be releasing at different times, but since the product is a common for every team, bam, we have the problems related to code merging, related to integration. So one of the ways to combat this is to, well, admit what we want to get rid of. We want to get rid of the long-living code branches, and we want to be integrating as quickly and as frequently to our main/master branch as frequently as possible. So for this, we are introducing a concept of the release train, and surprise, there is a small treat to do. So with the release train concept, we are thinking about a big group of people who are divided into cross-functional teams, and every of those teams will be working on the product that have the shared code. And we will try to do frequent small releases. We can think of it as a train that has multiple cars, and this train is going through the station. It is unloading the cars with multiple features, and every few minutes, every few days, there is the next car being unloaded. Now, to do this, we will be developing our code in the feature branches. And now a few important things. When developers will be writing their code, there should be wrapping this code under something called feature flag. Think of the feature flag like if it was a toggle in a code that basically says whether something is able to be executed on production or not. So So developers would be making some changes that are not ready. Those changes would be potentially going to production, but until someone switches the flag, the production should not be affected. And there are different ways to do those flags. One could think of the if statements inside the code, but it could be also done differently. Like we could have, let's say, a parameters that we tell nobody about, so nobody will use it on production. Like there are many different ways. And now the concept that we want to embed here is that we will not be merging to any release branches. We will not have any development branches. We just have feature branches, and then we have main, or if someone wants to prefer to call it master. That way we are, well, getting rid of the silos basically. But it will come with some costs. We will need to utilize our CICD pipelines to promote the code across multiple environments, including deployment to production and all of the environments that come before it. We will be utilizing our test automation to a very big extent, and the test automation will be the gatekeeper for our quality. If the tests are passing green, then the code that just got merged, even if this code is not complete, will go to production. Hopefully we remembered about the feature flags. And then, after we are happy with a feature, we can tell the guys on the production to turn on the feature flag. That's basically the concept that we want to follow. Now there will be a few dangers, and one of the dangers is related to how we are managing such project, because if we are planning only with a small horizon of time, then it may feel like our train is getting track put in front of it without much thought, and we are going into, well, semi-random direction. But from the quality standpoint, there is something even worse, because there is a risk that many of the changes will go to production untested. One of the problems are the feature flags themselves. Once you start using such approach, if you do not do it in a good way, you will end up with hundreds of feature flags. I'm not telling thousands, but I could imagine it could also happen. And then it becomes a nightmare to manage, because nobody knows what those flags are actually doing anymore, especially if they were written by someone who left the company and so on. There will be missing flags, which is a great problem, which is causing the half-baked changes to going to production. Well, if developer writes a code for a new feature and forgets to make a feature flag, this code will go to production unless some automatic test is catching this problem. But since this is a new feature, there will be no automation yet. Then, we usually are happy with our test automation coverage, maybe not. But with such aggressive approach, with the constant delivery to production and deployments, even good coverage is not good enough. There isn't any magic number that we would need to have to be sure that the quality will be in a safe space. And lastly, the people who are doing the release notes. With this approach, if the feature flag management is not done in a good manner, they will be living the nightmare during work, because it will get extremely hard to manage the communications to the clients. Okay, so having said the introductions, I hope that now we understand what we are dealing with, and we will try to build a model. We will do it step by step, starting with something basic that does not really resemble any real model at the beginning, but we are starting from scratch. So we will make a few assumptions. First of all, we have a single team. To make things easier, we are pushing the code to a single to a single repository. And we will be doing those very frequent merges to master branch. We will have, thanks to our DevOps guys, we will have pipelines that will be able to deploy the code. But the assumption that is important is that our CICD does not provision additional environments. the environment needs to be provisioned manually by some person holding the magic wand, for example. But once the environment is given to us, then our CI/CD is able to go through it and deploy the code. So our model, and hopefully I'm not really, okay. So our model will be extremely simple. We will start with developer making some code changes. They will do some testing locally. They will stand up the application at their local computers. Then they are making a PR. There will be some code review. And if code review is passing, then what happens? Bam, the code is on production. Obviously, that will not work, right? So what we are missing? We are missing a few key components. We do not know whether the unit tests actually passed. If we trust our developers, which we always do, then yes, maybe they pass, maybe they not, but better safe than sorry. At this stage, we do not know if those tests passed or not. We have no idea about the test coverage. Also, as a low-hanging fruit, we could think about adding some lint libraries that will help us with finding the defects through those scanners with some common defect patterns. And we also do not know whether the code is actually deployable, because the first time the code is getting deployed will be with the current model so far, will be when we are deploying to production. So here we had our old model, the most naive one, and now we are making it slightly better. We will introduce test environment, which will not have too many tests at this stage. This is still naive approach. But at least on this test environment, we will have a way to see if the code gets to be deployed properly or deployed at all. We will also add lint. Maybe we will add some additional scanners for the security or whatever, anything that works offline and does not require a human to actually perform the testing. That will be happening and this code scatter static testing place. And we will also make our pipelines to actually run the unit tests and report some coverage info, whether the tests are passing or not. On both production and test, we will add something I called heartbeats, but basically what we are adding at this stage is very easy way of saying whether the environment is alive. So for example, are APIs able to respond anything, right? Or are they dead and responding with error codes? Again, this is still very naive, so we need to push further. What we will do is that we will introduce some test automation, and what we will do next, we will introduce some feature flags. We did not have them yet. With this, we are looking at our model and what changes will happen. Our test environment will be put to some actual use. And now we will be running automated regression of various levels on this environment. If someone is thinking, why not shift left? Let's wait for feature slides. This is still not ideal. And then, very important activity is the testing related to feature flags and the manual testing. This activity, we must understand this one is asynchronous. We are not waiting at any point for the results of the manual tests. If the test automation for the existing features is green, then our code will be going to production. However, for the features which are truly hidden behind the flags, for those features we are able to keep doing manual testing as long as possible, and only after we are happy with those changes, only then someone on production will turn the toggle. Okay? More problems. The life is not easy. With this model, we are getting into a problem of the test environment being down all the time. As we will have a few developers pushing their changes, it's very likely that the test environment will be dead because of those changes. And once one developer fixes their problems, another developer will push the breaking change. So basically, our tests will be read all the time, or most of the time. Our manual testing will be impossible to happen. And what's more, we will not be able to release to production at all. Which is not a big thing, because then no defects on production. But that's not the point, right, of our work. So here, again, a few changes. Now, we need to shift some tests left. So we will add another environment, and the name does not mean anything. We can call it test 1, test 2, test 3, but I am giving the names that will, let's say, represent different stages of testing. So we will shift some of the tests left, and those tests will be our gate to stop the most breaking changes from making it into our real test environment. So if developers are crashing our application frequently, they will get this feedback a little more frequently. They will not need to wait for all of the tests to tell them so. And they will not be disrupting test environment so much. We are also introducing, instead of the heartbeats, or maybe in addition to those heartbeats or different types of monitoring, we are adding some small automation as a subset of our tests to production. So we will not only check if the production is alive, but we will also check through automatic manner whether our application is able to do the basic functions, like end-to-end. Okay? So with this, we have our model, and in a way that's our starting point, because now this model contains more stages, more test activities that, well, I guess maybe could work in a very small company, but it will run into multiple issues as we are increasing the scope and as we are increasing the number of people who are working with this model. Problems. Let's imagine that our automation has lots of test cases that are running for multiple hours. Of course, we are embedding parallelism in our tests to the possible extent, but our application itself, the processes that we test, they are slow, and we cannot do anything with parallelism here. If the processing takes 2 or 3 hours, and then another process that needs to be run needs to wait for the first one to finish, we will run into problems where our regression will be constantly delayed. We switch from regression that is run on a commit basis or on a merge basis to something that runs nightly, that's maybe slightly better, but this is a problem that we are still experiencing, even if we add additional test environments of the same class. Well, we had single team. Now we have multiple teams. Now we have 100 people. And instead of a single repository, there will be a few repositories that they are all committing the code to. All teams to all repositories at the same time. So it's getting very crowded. Feature flags, a concept that is great on paper and is also great in practice, but only if done right. And we as testers, we must know that done right does not always happen. So all of the problems I was mentioning with the feature flags, they start to happen on our environments. Clients, they hate getting code, the new code all the time. They rely on our stability, and they want to be told in advance about the new features. And with this approach, they are getting bombarded by small releases. Some of them may not like it. It depends on the product, on like the companies that we have, and so on. And the biggest problem of them all, if the developer is making a new feature, does not make a feature flag, and somehow this gets pushed to master, it's getting to production, and there is no chance that any test will stop it, because those tests are not written yet. Well, we tanked. There is no way for us to proceed. We need to change the model again, because we got exactly to this situation. Everything is on fire. So now we will be doing further modifications. We will be doing further changes to the model. And we start with me emphasizing that we need to shift even more test automation to the left. We need to shift left as much as possible, and some tests will still stay on those test environments. There will be further modification for it as well. But shifting left is paramount activity for us. Then we will be adding something in between our test environment, this testing stage, and production stage. At this point, we realize that going to production with every change that is not breaking the regression is not really giving us enough benefits. Yes, it makes us look modern, it makes us look very dynamic, but it is causing multiple problems that through those problems our production is suffering. So what we are deciding to do is that we want to be less modern, less dynamic. We need to have a release candidate builds that will get some additional verification. So once again, we are adding a new stage to our testing activities. We will call it CERT, but the name does not matter. It can be different in different companies. And our key here, what we are doing is that we want to lock down the code. On one specific day in a week, or a specific hour in a day, or however you want to do it, you are closing the gate, and the new code is no longer going to the release candidate. Basically, we are making a snapshot of our main/master branch, and we are doing some additional validation on it. If this validation is passing, including a test automation, then there is a human pressing one button, please continue. Otherwise, we are in a holding pattern, making sure that this release candidate is great. Of course, it's not as simple as that. It never is. But at this moment, we are opening the chance for us for some future success. What we need to emphasize also is that at this moment, with multiple teams, with hundreds of tickets going through, we need very solid feature flag management. Now, there are tools to help with this, like, for example, Launch Darkly or Dark Launchly. I always mix up those names. But those tools do not come for free. They are usually paid. However, they do help, and we need from our side either to use such sophisticated tools or make sure that our internal process is really solid. And what I did not say earlier, but with this approach, there is no such thing as rolling back the code. It's impossible with this model at all, even in the earlier stages. We will be always fixing forward. So if there is a defect, no chance for us to like roll back the code. We need to write a fix and apply it again. Okay? So what did we forget? Any ideas? What will be the next challenge, the next thing that we need to add? Sorry? For example, testing fixes and? Testing on prod. Yeah, also, yes. So, but first we will start with performance, right? And the order of how we will be adding it does not really matter. We need to add all of it, right? But on my slides, I started with performance testing because so far we were only running the regression that is checking the functional side. And, well, performance can also happen. I did mention that some of the processing is taking hours, right? If clients have been experiencing 1 hour of processing and now suddenly it's 3 hours, they may get upset, right? We also should add something about the compatibility testing. Maybe our company needs to add accessibility testing as well. We did not, but I thought I would add it for the sake of completeness. And there is also the problem of test automation running behind. Unless your companies can hire infinite number of testers, your test automation will run behind. Or maybe, if not, then it means that your delivery will be quite slow. So there will be tests that will get added quite quickly as part of the initial PRs, but there will be lower priority tests that, for let's say resource shortages, we plan to do later. Maybe never, but optimistically next sprint, right? So what changes will we do now? Well, we need to make a few changes in this place and this place. We start with performance. We are adding another environment. It cannot be the same one as we were using for our manual testing and regression testing. An environment where we will have, well, a performance that is running every day, for example, and that is checking whether this 1 hour processing gets any worse. As an added benefit, we could use this environment also for some investigations, because this environment will have the resources properly scaled up, it will have the proper size of the database. So if we need to do some ad hoc performance testing, that's the place where we can do it as well. Then, what we have is that we are also adding our capacity to do manual regression on the release candidate. If the test automation was lagging behind, like it usually does, unfortunately, this is the place where we can actually do some manual regression. It's extremely important. Why? I'm pretty sure that many of us have worked in companies where the test automation was not really built up front, where there was an existing product that ran for 2 years, and then someone decided, let's do test automation. In such case, it will take months, years, hard to tell how many, to actually get to the point where our automation coverage is good. But we first start with deciding the scenarios. So there will be some scenarios that will be simply waiting to be automated, and we need to be able to run them at that point. We can also add a possibility to run this accessibility testing, compatibility testing, like how our web application looks on multiple browsers, or whether it's easy to interact for people who have some disabilities. But that's, I would say, something more on an ad hoc basis, because at least for the accessibility, for the compatibility, it depends on your application, on your use case, on what your clients are actually expecting. So we got rid of those problems. What more did we forget? And we already see that we do not have a place to run UAT, or at least we forgot about it so far. And someone in the middle of the room said that we have no place to test fixes. And yes, that's actually a killer problem. Because with the approach that we had so far, with fixing forward of the defects, and with this approach where we are closing the gates so the release candidate is not getting any code, with this model we have so far, to make a fix to a release candidate, we need to open the gates of hell again, so the new fix can come in. Not only this fix will come in, however, we will also get changes from other features that tens of other developers did in the last day. And with this, we run a regression again, and bam, another defect. So we open the gates of hell again. More changes come in, bam, another defect, and we can be delaying the release to production for weeks if we need to open the release candidate to absorb all of the other changes from the main or master branches. And we also have no place to see whether some of the problems on production, whether they are happening on our test environments. All of the test environments so far, they have the code that is ahead of production. So we need a place to see, to debug the production that's on production, but not really do it in that place. That's a big no-no. Nobody likes it. Unless we have no choice. Let's be real, right? So we will make further changes to the model. We will add pre-prod. The model is getting complicated. right? We will add pre-prod, which will be the place that has the code the same as production. It can be used as a training ground for people using production, but we will also use it for replicating the bugs reported on prod. And we are also adding the UAT. UAT actually could be in two places, and this depends case by case. It can be added where we have it on the picture, so the release candidate would have its own UAT. This is a place where I would suggest have the automated UAT happening. And what I mean by this is that there may be some clients with their own automation, and they want to use some of our release candidate new features to see how their regression on their end works. So those would be the APIs that we would give them. That's the place on the picture. But if clients want to do the UAT of the features behind the feature flags, they can do it on this pre-prod, just change the configuration of the feature flag on pre-prod. And the hot fixes. We need to have completely separate pipelines to inject single code change to production or to release candidate. I am not really making more pictures because there are too many Lucids already on this presentation, but those would be completely different pipelines with much shorter life cycle of how the change is going. And those would be isolated from all of the other tickets which are in progress. Right? And this is where we are getting to the full model. I was specifically trying to show the model in parts earlier because that way it was bigger, it was easier to talk to rather than modify a big picture. But I am giving you this one as a kind of one of the final slides because it is showing the whole model. We started basically from zero. Now, there is one thing which I should have added to the slide. On this test environment at the top, before we are blocking new code, the manual testing is happening in a asynchronous manner. We are not waiting for manual testing to happen for the stuff that is under the feature flag. This can take weeks, days, months, whatever is needed, right? Okay, so if anyone is taking picture, I will move to the, okay, everyone seems to be done. I will move to the next slide. And there are some closing remarks. The CICD itself is something that might have been new 10 years ago, but by today is a complete standard for, I would guess, vast majority of the companies. But from our quality perspective, for testers, for developers, for various managers, if we want to manage quality right, it's extremely hard to do if we allow our pipelines to go all the way to production. If there isn't any way for human to make a stop and to press the button next, then we are running into issues. And what I am telling may be slightly different to what you might have been hearing on different conferences, lectures, and so on. But in my experience, this risk that there will be some changes which are incorrectly hidden under the feature flag, and the fact that there is no chance for automation to stop it, this risk is warranting to halt the process and actually add at least one human quality gate before we hit production. Then the feature flags, if the branches that we are using are extremely short-lived, that is something that I really recommend to do for every company. The long-living code branches should be avoided at any cost. But it is not as easy to say just use feature flags, or it is not easy just to say merge the code frequently and as often as possible. Like, that is a good motto for a lecture. It looks great on paper, and we should do it because it's true. But it's also hard to do it properly and to make sure that the quality does not suffer through those, let's say, common techniques that on paper look easy. They are not easy. We should do them, we should be careful, we should do it with some thought. And then what we were missing on those slides was the ability for automation to provision additional environments. Now, if the automation is able to also deploy the required infrastructure, so some Terraform stuff and so on, or VRA or whatever, then the model could be completely different. Maybe not completely, but the model could be better. Here, we did not have such luxury, so yeah, it was a little bit harder to manage quality and to make sure that everything gets tested in a proper way. For the feature flags themselves, again, they are one of the key components of getting rid of the long-living code branches, and they are one of the key components of breaking down the silos between the teams. And definitely we should be using them in our release train concept. Definitely. But again, it's not easy, right? There are so many dangers related to feature flags that we as a quality people, we should be always mindful for looking at those dangers and making sure that we are working on them proactively. We should not only look at it from the functional side, but we should also be aware that if the feature flags are running rampant, they are running wild, there are hundreds of them, they are not documented, they are not get rid of from the system, then after some time, the project will be on fire. I'm not sure if I mentioned this. The feature flags should be getting removed from the system after they have done their purpose. They cannot be left behind, because if they do, then I'm not even sure how to call such code base that has hundreds of the old feature flags. It's not spaghetti, right? It's maybe I would put some stages that are not. I would put some words after the recording is over. Yeah, and also with the feature flags, we should not be using them everywhere. Like use them at good places, right? For example, if we want to hide the button, yes, but if we want to do a refactor in tens of libraries and we want to add if statements in 250 places, that's not a good way to do it. As I said, the feature flags needs to be documented. They need to be removed from the system frequently. Otherwise, we will have this train that is spreading fire. And that's basically the end of the presentation. For anyone interested, here is my LinkedIn. There is also the code that you can use. And I'm not sure how much time I have left. I guess nobody was really making angry gestures at me, so probably there is still some time left.
Yeah, we have like time for 2 questions. I see David there.
Okay, no more Rodo. Yeah, I'm David. Question, you didn't mention about one aspect that is super important in that cases, and it's about costs. I mean, adding on top of that, that amount of environment, it's usually very, very costly. So how we approach like costs, or how you estimate, how you try to cut it off, or maybe for you, sky's the limit. I mean, just how you approach it.
Well, it all depends on your infrastructure and what costs are we actually talking about. In our case, the running costs of the environments, when they were idle and just waiting to be used, those costs were negligible. The costs were going up when we were actually processing the data, but for the most stages of testing, we were processing rather small files, so our friends from Snowflake or Databricks, they weren't really getting that much money from us. The problem was the performance testing, because there we were running bigger files. And yes, we ended up as running those performance tests once per week instead of running them as part of, let's say, everyday build. Now, if we were able to build the environments as part of the pipelines, it would be also different, because we would be able to spin up and tear down the environments, but that was not what we had capacity of doing.
Okay, Paweł, thank you for the very insightful presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I will ask only one, because there's not enough time. What is the frequency of the production releases and how it increased with the new model? That's my question.
Well, at the very beginning, when we were trying to do the long-living branches, the frequency of releases was once every quarter, because of so many problems we had with the code merging and trying to get a stable release. Then, when we tried to embed the feature flags, and after, let's say, the growing pains of this approach, we got to the place where we had a release planned every week. The problem, however, remained with the fixes, for which we did not really have a separate pipelines to insert them directly. So instead, we got into this problem where we were opening the gates of hell. More changes were coming into the release candidate, and this was delaying the release by another week. And then another week, maybe there would be more problems. So on average, we were releasing, let's say, at the time when the team was staffed properly, and the project was one of the key projects, we were releasing every 1 or every 2 weeks. So on average, 1.5 weeks, I would say. But this was like a constant day in a week that was supposed to happen. Now, the story about the project went, let's say, lost the priority that it previously had. Most of the developers went into our new offerings. And right now the project is in the KTLO mode, mostly with the upgrades and some small feature changes. So right now the releases are much less frequent.
And one last question.
I have one question about feature flags and testing them, because in my previous company we had issues with feature flags. For example, when we turn on something on production, something went wrong because we didn't test that automatically, or when we turn on 2 featured flags and it wasn't tested automatically. So what about that? Should we test all combinations of featured flags on something else?
That's actually impossible because of the sheer scale of those combinations. Like if we had, let's say, 3 flags, then yes, let's do it. But if we have hundreds, I'm not even sure how many years it would take. So I would say try to analyze which flags may interact with each other and try to test such pairs. We were not the best at it, so there were situations related to it on production. There is no easy answer. I guess it's quite similar for your company or your project.
Thank you, Paweł. If you will have any further question, please catch Paweł in the foyer or during the conference. So, bravo.